With the upcoming football, or soccer for Americans, matches coming up between Peru and Chile, I for one feel very excited. Not only has football shown to be a great contest between the two nations, but it's also a very cultural thing. I might add that I am Hispanic origin myself, and I do find it rather to be a big part of my culture. Overall, the way it currently stands between the two nations is that Peru has lost 45 games with Chile, has drawn 14, and has lost a total of 23, so it's pretty clear who's in the lead. The thing is that this is the record ever since 1935, which is almost 100 years ago. Being that soccer is such fierce competition between the two nations, I would imagine that it is one of those things that is always going to be a thing of conversation between the two states. I, for one, think that this is actually a good thing to have between two countries simply because if the competition is not a sport, well, it could easily be anything else. In my interest in watching these soccer matches play out, one thing that is unsettling, literally, is the allowance of a tie or a draw, as they call it. I, for one, do not like for something to be missing an ending. It's like reading a book with the last chapter ripped off. In all the matches that have ended in a draw with Peru and Chile, they should have just used something else instead, more preferably a continuation of the game. If the game could be continued, then that would not only give some closure, but would show a better image of what team is actually better. Just think about all the games that have ended in a draw. Those are games where no true victor is announced, and even if Peru does hold more loses with Chile, having all of those games go undetermined doesn't actually grant the other team their victory overall. To find the true better half of the two, one must actually show who is the better player of the two in an absolute accurate static that does not include any drawn games. Now on to a more recent note. From Peru's standpoint, their graph of wins and loses looks like the stock market, going up and down and looks like it's about to go into a complete circle. On one hand, you have Peru as the losing team, and if you ever encounter a Peruvian and strike up a conversation about soccer, they will have probably a billion excuses as to why their team is currently at a losing ends with Peru, whether that be an excuse for placing the blame on the players, or more likely it's going to be an excuse stemming from calls that the referees have made that are just not exactly reasonable or accurate. Well, I guess you can say that it is the same across all sports, that there are calls that the referees make that are not true or accurate. However, if you have ever watched a soccer match, you will notice that whenever there is a call made, someone on the bleachers or the crowd goes absolutely nuts, and sometimes they do have a right to go absolutely haywire because some of these calls are just not accurate, but at the end of the day, we all make mistakes. On top of that, who knows how many fights have stirred up between the two among the crowd? It's really surprising the lengths that some fans go to protect the perspective of a sport. Well, when it all comes down to it, at the same time, it's understandable the one thing that the two have going for them is Pride Month, their country, so of course they are going to have to protect it. Now bear in mind that the rivalry between the two teams has been a long-standing one since 1937. I mentioned that there has been a very long-standing feud between the two, but their impact of each other's culture only makes things more of a competition. I really used to love playing soccer when I was younger, growing up in a Latin household. It's kind of one of those things that gets nested in. Your life, among many other things, well, as you grow up, you do notice that competition gets more fierce and competitive as you age. Same goes for the two countries. I really don't think that until there is something done about these drawn games, things will more than likely stay the same. It's such an important point because we need to see a victor in the two. The good parts about the rivalry are how it brings certainty. Families together, picture yourself at a family dinner. Watching the match on TV is something that the whole family can gather around and actually enjoy watching. Not to mention, it can be the topic of conversation among a variety of different atmospheres. That is, of course, if you're both rooting for the same team. Well, at the end of it, I guess you would be able to say that soccer is one thing that you can truly use to judge the two countries by, simply because it is a very simple sport, and for another thing, it is a way to measure the two's ethic and sense of sportsmanship. Soccer is a very simple game. There's a ball, two teams, and whoever scores the highest wins. unlike other sports that it gets mistaken for, which is very complicated. Soccer will not only be something of culture, but something of a competition. I'm very excited to see what the future might have set out for us. I'm not leaning towards one team or the other, but I am going for a better system that does not include draws simply because it is a story left unfinished. I do hope they change it soon.